It has been a year since Pope Francis's passing last April, and in May will mark the one-year anniversary of Pope Leo's election as he wraps up a 10-day apostolic visit to Africa. What is the enduring legacy of the late Pope Francis, and what has already been revealed about Pope Leo? Joining us is President Emeritus of the Acton Institute, Father Robert Sirico. Father, thanks for being here. Pope Leo paused on April 21st aboard the papal plane. He was on his way to Equatorial Guinea, and he offered a moving remembrance of his predecessor. Watch this. I would like to remember on this first anniversary of his death, Pope Francis, who gave and offered so much to the Church through his life, his witness, his words, and his actions. Let us pray that he is already enjoying the mercy of the Lord, and let us give thanks to the Lord that the great gift of Francis's life and the whole Church and the entire world. Father, you met Pope Francis, you watched his pontificate closely. When you step back and look at the sweep of this, the good and the difficult, what's the lasting legacy of Jorge Bergoglio?
Well, certainly, it's the fractious nature of the church. He said that he wanted to create a mess, and he has. And I know on one level that it can only be seen in a negative way, but on another level, I think he's moved enough of the pieces around that we can reflect on things that have been part of the conversation for a long time that preceded Francis, that enable us to see things in a new perspective. And I think Leo is the man who can move this forward in a very cohesive way.
Yeah, Francis, look, Pope Francis had a very, on the one hand, he did go out to people. He was, he didn't believe in formality. At times, he dropped, a lot of the traditional practices of the popes, the dress, certainly the routine of the pope was shaken. As you said, he wanted to make a mess, and he thought he could shake, if that shaking would bring about what the Holy Spirit intended. We're still left with synodality, which I think will probably be the lasting. If there's one lasting legacy of Francis, it will probably be this synodal model. Now, whether it carries on, we'll see. But certainly I think he envisioned that as one of his legacies.
Yeah, I think one can use the word without the same meaning that the Germans were trying to give to it. And if I detect a movement in that direction, at present, I think we're using the word, but we're coming at it from a different angle. It's not democracy.
Yeah, well, this upcoming consistory that the Pope is holding,
tell us a lot.
The cardinals didn't care much for the small groups. They want to meet as a group and they want to have their voices heard. We'll see if Leo accepts that or adopts in any way bits of the synodal model and kind of rolls it into his own direction. But Pope Leo chose his name deliberately to invoke Leo XIII, the author of Rerum Novarum, the very document that really inaugurated Catholic social teaching. From your perspective at the intersection of faith and economics, Father, how different are these two pontificates in tone, in emphasis, and what continues to surprise you?
Well, I think in tone, it's very dramatic difference, right? Because Leo is a listener. Leo is not off the cuff. I think that Pope Francis was very off the cuff. He said things. How many times have we seen him take a speech and set it aside and say, "You can read this later, but let me tell you what I think." The poor speech writers in the Vatican, I felt sorry for all the work they pour into those things. So in terms of tone, it's very different. Leo is much gentler, much more considered, much less ferocious in his presentation of things. I think in terms of content, from what I'm seeing so far, there's a lot of thought, a lot of he really knows Augustine. He really is embedded in the fathers and in the tradition of the church. I think he's very attentive to his immediate predecessor in a very respectful way, and I think that's part of the shift from that pontificate to this pontificate, tonally as well. In terms of emphasis, I think he's slowly beginning to develop his own set of priorities. And I think this next year is going to tell us a lot, especially as we see the emergence of this consistory, as we see new appointments in the Roman Curia, and as we especially read the first encyclical that'll be out pretty soon.
Yeah, no, these are all benchmarks that will no doubt cast,
Right.
the light into the future of this pontificate and tell us where we stand today.
Yes.
I want to talk a little about Pope Leo's visit to Africa. He's been there for 10 days. He's visited 4 countries, Algeria and Cameroon, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea. He told students in Cameroon, Father, and I want your reaction to this because you talk about shifts in a pontificate. This, to me, is a major shift. He said the following: in the face of the understandable tendency to migrate, which may lead one to believe that elsewhere a better future may be more easily found, I invite you first and foremost to respond with an ardent desire to serve your country and to apply the knowledge you are acquiring here to the benefit of your fellow citizens. Now, this address was given to university students in Cameroon. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's so sensible and really has a deep respect for the country and the importance of, stemming the brain drain. When he's speaking to these people, these are the future leaders of the country, and if they're just going to other countries to find a better way of life, they're leaving behind a lot of people and their own heritage. So I think that is the first step. Now, it's not to say that people don't have needs to immigrate at various times, but the first step should be the local resolution of any problems.
Yeah, no, to me, it marks a huge shift because he's saying, look, you have an obligation to stay where you are and to enrich and build up your own culture, your own people. And I think there's been a tendency in recent days to say, well, look, go to the West. Everybody should go to the West. Well, then what happens to Africa? What happens to the East? I mean, these communities are decimated. And we've seen that certainly in the Middle East with Christians fleeing the Holy Land and the adjoining territories. There's virtually no Christian presence left, native Christian presence.
It's a real challenge for them to hear this, though, because the circumstances are very often arduous. And I think having the Holy Father address that question in the way in which he did really calls them to a higher vocation in a sense. He's really asking them to give of themselves and not just think of themselves.
Great. Yeah, no, it's really important. In Annaba, which is the ancient city of Hippo, Pope Leo, the great Augustinian, and you talked about him being an Augustinian boy, this visit was particularly to Hippo so that he could visit the ruins of the basilica where St. Augustine served as bishop for 35 years, where he wrote the City of God, and where he died in 430 as the Vandals laid siege outside the walls. Father, what does it mean for this particular pope to make that journey? And what does St. Augustine's witness speak to in this present moment, not only for the Pope, but for the Church at large?
Well, you can just imagine, I mean, a founder speaks to the heart of his vocation as a priest. I mean, he's Augustinian, and for him to go to these places, incredibly meaningful. And he certainly, it isn't just a superficial knowledge that he has of Augustine. He's written on Augustine, he's spoken about Augustine, of course, as the presider or the superior of the Augustinians. But I think, too, the connection of Augustine to the modern events. I mean, he wrote The City of God and the City of Man. What are the conflicts that are on the front pages of our newspaper in the last years? It's civil life and religious life. It's church and state. And he is really drenched in it. Remember, this is the first Augustinian pope, if I'm not mistaken. And
yeah, I think so.
Very, very meaningful. And I think Augustine certainly speaks to the question of just war theory, because he was one of the main developers of that whole understanding. So I'm hoping that the Vatican will clarify its statements on just war. Where do we stand as a church? It's in the catechism, it's in the DNA of the church, to speak about these things, and it presumes nation states. You can't, it's one thing to be a pacifist as an individual; it's quite another to ask an entire nation to be pacifistic. So I think we need to return to an understanding that. I don't think we have a better teacher than in Leo.
What do you make of the imbroglio we've heard in recent days? And I'll get to it later, the kind of media fracas of it. But it really is a question of just war. That's what we were talking about, and
Yes.
what's being articulated. Where do you stand on this? And because look, Father Jerry Murray was on the show last week, and he said he considers this a just war because you had an aggressor nation terrorizing its neighbors, terrorizing its own people, laying waste to 30,000, 40,000 Iranians, that you have an oppressive regime that if they have the possibility of nuclear weapons, that changes the math on just war. Your thoughts?
Well, I have a high regard for Father Murray, of course. And the question in my mind is access to intelligence. If the intelligence is what it appears to be, then this can be a just war engagement. I think where the Pope spoke to this was the tweet of the president on Easter Sunday, in which he talked about destroying an entire civilization. Now, you can say that was a misstep, it was a misstatement, he didn't mean quite a minute, but the Pope had to address what was said. The Pope is moral leader, and we need to be very clear, there is no just war when you're talking about in the intentional taking of civilian human life. That's very clear in the principles of just war. So I just wish the president was a little clearer in outlining, and that his advisors would ask him to speak in the language of just war theory. If it is the case that they have the capability and have shown the willingness to assault innocent people far from their borders even, then this could be considered a just war. It still remains the obligation of the state to make that determination, but the Pope has to contribute to the discussion. He can't remain silent in the face of that.
Right. Before Hippo, Pope Leo removed his shoes and stood in silent reflection inside the Grand Mosque of Algiers, the third largest mosque in the world. Now, he's done something similar in Istanbul when he visited there. He also notably declined an invitation to join in prayer at that time, Father. How do you read these gestures and this engagement with Islam? Some would say, look, he's very forthright and willing to point the finger at the United States and the West and Bibi Netanyahu when they get out of line, but he's a little less as demonstrative when it comes to Islam and the bloody borders that they enforce in some of their countries.
Well, I don't think taking off your shoes when you go into a mosque is a statement of capitulation doctrinally, And the Pope made very clear that he was not engaging in a kind of syncretistic or indifferentism. I think he has tread the thing. I mean, if you go into an Asian home, the tradition is to take off your shoes. And I think that was, I don't think it was any kind of religious statement. With regard to whether the Pope has been equally critical, the Holy See has a plethora of releases and materials. I've been in Rome this whole period of time. I don't know if it reflects on me, but the Pope left when I arrived, and he'll be coming back when I leave. So I kind of missed him, but I went to a very interesting briefing at the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See on Nigeria, and learned a lot about the situation in Nigeria. And it is not the case that the Holy See has been silent on that. If you go to the Holy See's website, you'll see a really quite detailed enumeration of the situation of both the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. I met one of the priests who comes from the town where the worst episodes have taken place. So I think the Pope is getting a bad rap from the media and from even a lot of Catholics who are concerned that there's an imbalance in his relationship. I think my read of him is that he's just trying to be prudent and open up areas of conversation. He is not a politician. He doesn't exist to create public policy, but he wants to be the bridge builder. And I think we need him in that role.
Yeah. In Equatorial Guinea, the Pope delivered an address invoking the aforementioned Rerum Novarum and Catholic social doctrine. And he warned that armed conflicts are increasingly driven by the exploitation of oil and mineral deposits. He pointed to rapid technological changes, an accelerant of global inequality. And he said that God's holy name must not be profaned by the will to dominate by arrogance or by discrimination.
Yes.
Your thoughts and reactions to all of this, Father?
You know, I think in a number of these instances, you have a kind of, call it crony capitalism, where the governments are disregarding the property rights of people in various areas. And that's creating a lot of the tensions. Very often the people in the areas where there are natural resources that could be very valuable don't participate in the benefits of that extraction. And if that's the circumstance that he's dealing with, which in a lot of these developing countries is precisely it, that the political leaders are benefiting from it and using violence to be able to extract these resources, that's one thing. If it's a market exchange where people are benefiting, being paid, enjoying some revenues and benefits to their communities, that would be another thing altogether. I'm not sure of the particular circumstances that he was addressing.
In an ancillary matter, this is the first time an American Pope has ever sat on the throne of Peter, and yet on July 4th, the 250th birthday of the United States of America, Pope Leo has chosen not to be here. He will be on the island of Lampedusa, a politically loaded location due to the immigration policy, Father. Is the absence of the Pope from his own country on the occasion of the 250th anniversary, with 70 million Catholics in the pews and the Church's relationship with Washington already strained, is that a missed opportunity to mend fences and, as you said, build bridges?
You know, I've had some conversations with people pretty high up in the Vatican on this very topic. And just give me a moment to kind of narrate what I think are the considerations here. First of all, we know that from the first moment Leo stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's, he clearly indicated that he wanted to be the Pope of the Universal Church, an American who is Pope, but not an American Pope. And I think there have been, by not speaking English, for example, I think he does not want to get drawn into, it'd be so easy for a Pope to be drawn into day-to-day American politics like everybody else. And in that sense, we would lose a very important asset. I think with regard to coming to the United States, it's always a difficult time for the Pope. And it's just not just in the United States. I mean, Francis never went to Argentina. I have no doubt that Leo will come to the United States. But to come in an election year with an election so fraught right now, it would be impossible for him not to be pulled to one side or the other in the course of the debate. And I think, especially after the recent provocations, I think they see it as not a wise step, because it would drag him into being an American Pope rather than the Pope of the Universal Church. I think he will come, but I don't think he's going to come at this moment, which is so fraught with such polarization, both within both parties, within the United States, and now with Europe and the Vatican.
You've been in Rome for the last week. How are they viewing this fallout between President Trump and the Pope? What are they? How are they how are they sort of processing that whole episode?
Well, in a variety of ways. There's some people who are absolutely appalled, and intolerant of the whole thing, just from a traditional point of view. Remember, Europe. Maloney entered this, a friend of Trump, previously, very big supporter of Trump. I should say that the president has made Maloney very popular in Italy and in Europe generally. But I think the most honest statement I can make from the conversations that I have is that people are bewildered. How does the president of the free world, the president of the most prosperous nation, most powerful nation in the world, speak to the religious leader who is seen as the father of almost a 1,300,000,000 people in the manner in which our president did? And I think there's a great bewilderment, and I have this sense that they want to be. I mean, a lot of these people are torn because now you have an American on the throne of Peter, so they don't want to be anti-American, and I think they're very careful not to be, but they're bewildered by what has happened since Easter.
Yeah. Well, Father Robert Sirico, we will leave it there. Thank you for the time. We'll see you when you're stateside, I hope, soon. And I won't leave
Okay, I hope so. Oh, please don't.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.